So I'd like to just open it up to everyone to ask questions or to speak, to give your responses, your inner responses to what you heard. Um, and we'll go from there. So Bob's doing what you should do if you want to talk, which is raise your hand. And down at the bottom, there is, what is it? Reactions, a reaction button under, and you can raise your hand that way. If you can't quite figure that out, it also works to unmute yourself, and then you float up to the top of my screen on the side, and I can see you that way too. Okay, Bob, go ahead.
Can you hear me then?
Yeah.
Okay. So I moved, I relocated my primary residence to Ohio over the course of the last 6 months from Connecticut and your area there. It was interesting is, I'll circle back to that in a second. When I saw the topic of your course, integrity, it feels like for me it's very much tied into truth. The word truth comes forth for me, and it's interesting as I moved back here, I kind of sort of stepped into a little bit of a different culture, if you will. And it's not to paint Ohio different from the East Coast, because there's pockets of different cultures even around here, but maybe more in a I don't know, the more masculine, tougher energy, protected, stoic or something. And the reason why I say this is I've noticed, in speaking to folks and people and interacting and socially with my family, friends, and circles and new people, I see myself managing my, the message or what I'm saying, and it's sort of there's like the social aspect, but there's like maybe stuff that's deeper and truer. The social, okay, I can manage that pretty well, but saying things aren't necessarily true, or just being agreeable to be agreeable and avoiding what I know is going to be conflict, and saying certain things, or I've done certain things in the spiritual realm, and that aren't, Holy Catholic and, the whole thing that I grew up in, you know what I mean? And it's interesting seeing that at play, because at the end of the day, I don't like conflict. I think I tend to know where those potholes are going to be. I don't want to be poked at or challenged, and it's just easier to be agreeable and let it go along. And so I just want to mention that. And there's the benign stuff, in conversation, but there's even like I take it to a more serious example, and just talking about my brother. My brother passed away earlier this year, quite unexpectedly, and unfortunately, he died by his own hand. And for a lot of folks here in my circle, even my father, and my brother's a police officer or whatever, I find myself managing initially that message and not talking about that, and that 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 really felt disharmonious inside. I gave that up probably after a week. And maybe that speaks a little bit to that feeling tone that you talked about earlier. Something didn't feel right.
Yes.
It just didn't feel quite right. And I respect, that every person I talk to may be able to take that message, maybe have a better capacity to hear that. And I appreciate that. But then I get, after a week, I just started telling people the truth. And this is what happened. And boy, did that feel so much better. I got the release, any things about shame around that whole concept, and there's shame on the family, and even going back to, to the Catholicism that we grew up in, that's not really looked upon, and all that good stuff. And boy, that felt good. And I can't tell you, like, the response, how many folks had reached out to me privately over the past 6 months to, thank me for, talking, sorry,
You don't have
you
to
know,
apologize, Bob.
talking about
Tears are welcome.
such matters with truth and forthrightness, without the shame, to release that. There's a lot of people that suffer, and struggle, and appreciated the opportunity to talk, and find out more and whatever. And I guess it's just, that was an example of letting that go, and an amazing result coming forth, presenting itself from people I never knew, suffered in this way. It really took me by surprise, and stepped forth. And it's something I will absolutely carry forth with me, going forward. Um, yeah, just an amazing example, and helps me remember about truth, and speaking truth, and what's it's true, rather than managing um, everything. So I think I'll just leave it at that and make sure other folks have time. But yeah, I just wanted to share that.
Well, thank you, Bob. Wow,
Yeah.
it's very powerful. And I think you illustrated better than I could the power of integrity, what it is to feel out of harmony with yourself in some way, and to change because you notice that. Change because you notice it doesn't feel right, it doesn't feel wholesome. And it's so powerful too, the way people respond to that. When you come into integrity, it like invites other people to come forth. And, you know, suicide, it's something that people don't talk about, or they feel like they have to hide. And yet it touches so many people's lives. So many people's lives have had a relative, friend, someone they know who has taken their own life, you know. And then you add to them all the people who have died of overdoses. It goes on and on. And it's such a powerful thing to speak the truth here. So thank you. Thank you. It's a great example. And I'm sorry you're so far away, if I may say. In terms of your homework this week, you might notice what it feels like to adjust. Sometimes when you adjust what you say, it feels right based on how somebody's going to react. And sometimes when you adjust what you say, it doesn't feel right based on what somebody's going to react. And one thing that's kind of a clue to me is if there's a little bit of fear in me to say something, chances are it would be better and powerful to say it, you know? Whereas if there's something in me that feels harsh and condemning, I actually feels better not to say it, find a way to say it that's not that. So we'll talk about that more, but this is a big place that you can practice this week around wholesome and unwholesome. Just that sense of adapting yourself to other people, what's going on there. All right, who else would like to speak here? Yes, Diane.
I wonder what you might think of this. A few months ago, I think a colleague came in to discuss something at the end of the day, and I think it was something raised by Brene Brown, actually. And the comment was, do you believe that people are doing their best? And it was an interesting discussion that sort of led to the conclusion that if we do believe everyone is doing their best in every interaction, it tends to reduce resentment. And when I consider that at times, I find it does help with that feeling of entitlement, which you mentioned earlier. And is that sort of a useful I don't know, for some reason, it just keeps surfacing almost on a daily basis, and I find it helpful. So just
Yeah,
posing the
I
question.
can comment on that. I think in general that is a very skillful way to approach people, that they're always doing the best. It reflects, I think the idea, and I think the idea is a true one, that when people act unskillfully, it's out of ignorance. It's not out of intention. They're not intentionally trying to be unskillful. If they knew better, they wouldn't act that way. So when you realize how much of the suffering people create is out of ignorance, I find it humbling. We don't actually always see ourselves or see what we do. And we also don't know the causes and conditions that are operating in other people's lives. It's hard enough to know the causes and conditions that are impinging on my own, much less to actually see what are the causes and conditions that are impinging on a person from their history and from their innate capacity. What are all those things? We don't see that. It's invisible to us. So by approaching them with the idea they're doing the best they can, there's goodwill. There's goodwill offered to the other person almost automatically. That given the causes and conditions that have been present in their life thus far, they're actually working with it the best they can. Did you find anything in you that resisted this notion?
I think initially, my response to my colleague was, I'm not sure people are always doing their best, because I think about times when I've regretted something I've done.
Mm-hmm.
But then I had to sort of realize, well, at the time, I didn't know a lot of the things that I know now, and I had to be forgiving of myself. And also reminds me of that beautiful commencement speech by David Foster Wallace. This is water, because it's so. I've been in and still struggle with being judgmental and being quick to judge actions of others, and judge myself a lot too. So I think framing it this way has really helped.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, one frame of reference I find very helpful, and it's actually the basis of a lot of what I have done as a psychotherapist, is that we're actually all kind of a multiplicity of parts. And one of the aspects of ignorance is sometimes we don't notice that a part of us has taken over, say an entitled part, feels like I have something coming. And we end up like getting mad or speaking harshly to someone out of that. And then later we go, oh, and then there's this kind of reaction of shame, because now we're unblended from that part. And now we're back in a different part that looks at that behavior and is like, oh my goodness, I feel so embarrassed. That's how human beings are. And when you notice it in yourself, you're so much more likely to forgive it in someone else. They're taken over. And then there are certain individuals who almost never become conscious of their, entitled parts. They just live blended with that. But, you can't really judge that, because when you're taken over by that, we all know the blindness of that. We all know the blindness when we're just, somehow intoxicated by what we think is due to us. And we don't actually see the other person. We don't see the impact of how we're treating the other person. We don't see the impact of how we're living. We just, we're completely intoxicated by something for a while. So the more you observe that in yourself, the easier you are on other people when that happens. And you can also say something, if you can speak from a place that's not judgmental of that, sometimes you can wake people up from a part of them that they're taken over by. If you're in a non-shaming, non-harsh way, you can actually invite somebody back into consciousness. So that's a whole nother aspect of this. All right. Thank you. So we're just about out of time for tonight. Just want to take a moment and see if there's anything else I want to say as I send you off into the world. I think that this is a big enough topic that you will have no trouble coming up with things to notice about it. One thing I recommend for those of you who are new in this class is if you can meditate daily, it really helps. There's something about the meditation practice, the way that it lowers the reactivity of the mind and increases your ability to notice what's happening moment to moment, that will make other things like doing the homework easier. You'll just, the insights will be clearer, they'll come more often. It's the opportunity in this class to actually ground yourself in a meditation practice if you don't have one. And I'm saying this too for people who have come for years and may not have yet grounded themselves in a meditation practice. This is an opportunity when you're in the class to use the class as kind of like support for you to establish a daily practice. And I'll just say just a couple of words about what I think works for that. A daily practice, I think, works the best if you know when it's going to happen each day when you wake up. And that usually works the best if it's the same time every day. I do it first thing in the morning after I've had a cup of tea. Okay, so I know when it's going to happen, and so it happens. It's very rare that it doesn't happen. So that's really the first thing, is figure out when you're going to do it and do it. Then secondly, do it regardless of how you feel that day. And don't judge it at the end of it. So if you're feeling kind of groggy and like, oh, this will be a bad meditation, I think I don't want to do it anyway. Just be mindful of being groggy. Or if you do meditate and it's like your mind is all over the place, all you did was plan your day, don't judge your meditation. You succeeded in meditating if you sat down and sat still for a period of time. Now, I think the easiest way to start a practice that you want to have is to listen to somebody guide you. So here you have a recording of me leading meditation each week that you can just play on your computer while you're meditating, and it will hold you there for 30 minutes. You don't have to do 30 minutes. You can do 15. Often the body scan is about 15 minutes long. You could do 20. So it's not the length of time that I would care about as much as that it's consistent. And so use the recording as an aid for that. Let me think, anything else? Yeah, the only bad meditation is the one you don't do. Okay, that's just a point of view that I think is helpful for establishing a meditation practice. Rather than wanting to have a particular type of experience and always feeling like you're failing because you never get what you think of you're supposed to get when you're meditating. All right. So I'm going to send you on your way. And it's just so wonderful to see you all again. Those of you who are returners, it's good to see some new faces. And look for those links coming. All right, be well.